Daniel Jeremiah just spoke, and what came out of his mouth about Brandon Aiyuk and the Washington Commanders is the most important thing you're going to hear this week in the DMV, because there is something happening around Aiyuk that virtually nobody in the NFL saw coming. Jeremiah talked to beat reporters, to people inside teams, to sources around the league, and what he revealed completely shifts the balance of power between San Francisco and Washington. By the time you get to that part of this video, you are going to understand exactly why Adam Peters may be sitting in the strongest negotiating position of this entire offseason. But that is not the only thing moving right now out of Ashburn. The draft is 11 days away, pick number 7 in Pittsburgh, and there is a very real scenario with actual names like Caleb Downs, Mansour Delane, and Sonny Styles on the board, where that position of power turns into the biggest nightmare Peters has faced since arriving in Washington. The board can collapse in a way that no fan in the DMV is fully processing yet. And while all of that is developing, the Commanders hosted official visits this week from Omar Cooper Jr. and Emmett Johnson, two completely different profiles, and one of them carries a comparison that nobody in Washington saw coming, one that could redefine days 2 and 3 of this entire draft. Raise hail, subscribe, and hit that like button right now if you trust the Adam Peters process. Daniel Jeremiah, one of the most respected talent evaluators in the NFL network, came out and said something that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. He talked to people around the league, beat reporters, front office types, and he said that Brandon Aiyuk's name simply isn't coming up in any conversation. Zero. Complete silence. How is it possible that a receiver who 2 years ago was considered a top 5 guy at his position isn't generating a single whisper across the entire NFL? And look, I get it. Aiyuk didn't play a single snap in 2025. Knee, surgery, recovery, and on top of that, his relationship with the 49ers is completely destroyed. He and the San Francisco staff haven't spoken since November. This isn't an awkward situation. It's a full breakup. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are clearly irritated because Aiyuk's connection to Jaden Daniels in Washington became public knowledge, and that rubbed them the wrong way. So here we are, an elite receiver, and when healthy, who wants to come to Washington, who nobody else is chasing, and the Niners are basically holding him hostage because his roster bonus doesn't come due until September 1st. Now, here's where it gets interesting. From a Commander's perspective, Adam Peters is not a GM who acts on impulse. We've seen it in every single move this offseason. He calculates, he evaluates, and when he pulls the trigger, he does it with precision. The question is whether the silence around the league on Aiyuk changes the equation for Washington. Because if nobody is making an offer, the Niners are eventually going to have to make a decision. Do they let Aiyuk go for a 7th-round pick in 2027? Do they release him and get nothing? Or do they just let the whole situation rot until September and completely damage the player in the process? None of those options favor San Francisco. And here's my real take, no sugarcoating. Aiyuk is 30 years old and coming off a serious knee surgery. The cap hit over the final 3 years of his deal is massive, over $100 million. Peters is not making that trade unless the cost is so low that it would be irresponsible not to. But if the Niners get desperate and ask for a 7th rounder, fam, that changes the entire conversation. What Jeremiah revealed without even trying to is that Washington holds the leverage in this situation. Not San Francisco. If no other team is interested, the Commanders can wait, let the pressure build on the Niners side, and eventually see if a window opens. In the meantime, Washington keeps doing their homework in the draft, and that takes us directly to what could happen in Pittsburgh in less than 2 weeks. Okay, listen, this is the part no fan wants to think about, but everyone needs to process. The draft is 11 days away. Washington holds the 7th overall pick, and in theory, that should be a position of power. But there's a scenario, a very real scenario, where that position turns into an absolute nightmare. Here's the nightmare fuel. The Commanders have urgent defensive needs. Edge rusher, cornerback, linebacker. This was a defense that suffered last season and needs real talent up front. The 2026 class has pieces. Caleb Downs from Ohio State, Sonny Styles, Mansour Delane from LSU. Real names, real players that fit. But what happens if the Jets, the Titans, the Raiders, the teams picking ahead of Washington all decide to go defensive? What happens if the board collapses and by the time Adam Peters is on the clock, the best defenders are already gone? At that point, Peters is forced to pivot to the offensive side. And that's not necessarily a disaster, but it leaves the most urgent needs unresolved. And then there's the capital problem. Look, Washington has 6 total picks. 6. And the gap between pick 7 and their next selection is enormous. Number 71 in the 3rd round. No second-round pick. That was traded away in the Laramie Tunsil deal, so can they trade back and accumulate capital? Maybe, but only if there's demand. And with just one quarterback viewed as a legitimate top 10 talent in this class, the urgency to move up in the board might simply not be there. If nobody wants to trade up, Washington stays at 7, takes a quality player, but doesn't fix the roster's depth issues, and that is a genuine problem for a team that needs to compete in the NFC East. And I'll be honest, bro, part of me is nervous about the Jeremiah Love temptation. Love is a name that has been constantly linked to Washington. The Notre Dame running back is elite. The idea of pairing him with Jaden Daniels is cinematic, but burning the 7th pick on a running back when you already have Jackery Krosky-Merritt, Rachad White, Jerome Ford, and Jeremy McNichols in your backfield, that is a luxury this roster simply cannot afford. The truth is, the success of this draft for Washington doesn't just come down to who they pick. It comes down to how the board falls, and that is completely out of Adam Peters' control. The only thing Peters can do is prepare for every scenario, and if there's anyone in this league with the ability to do that, and while all the attention is locked on pick number 7, the Commanders have been doing their homework quietly for days 2 and 3. This weekend, Washington hosted Omar Cooper Jr. on an official pre-draft visit. The wide receiver from Indiana, the national champion Hoosiers, the team that went 16-0. Cooper caught 69 passes for 937 yards and 13 touchdowns last season. 13. He tied the school record with 4 touchdowns in a single game. Now, Cooper's not the biggest receiver on the board. 6 feet even, 200 pounds. Not the prototype for a dominant X receiver, but what he brings is toughness at the catch point, acceleration after the catch, and an ability to win in contested situations. That is exactly what Jaden Daniels needs in his arsenal. The weakness is his route tree. Needs to be polished. His consistency was questioned in earlier years, though this past season he silenced most of his critics convincingly. Scouts project him in the day 2 window. He likely won't make it to pick 71 where Washington is. So if Peters wants Cooper, he either needs to trade back from 7 to get a second rounder or hope for a miracle. And then there's Emmett Johnson from Nebraska. The Commanders also hosted him on an official top 30 visit this week, and this guy is a different kind of prospect. 5'10", 202 pounds, led the entire FBS with 151.8 all-purpose yards per game. 4,451 rushing yards, averaging 5.8 per attempt, 12 touchdowns, second-team All-American. He doesn't have the ceiling of Jeremiah Love. He's not going to break tackles for 60 yards on pure athleticism, but Johnson is decisive, consistent, and dangerous in the passing game. The type of back who sees the hole and doesn't hesitate. And at pick 71, he could still be available. And if you want more scouting depth at the position, Mike Washington Jr. from Arkansas is also generating serious buzz. The man ran the fastest 40 of any running back at the Combine this year. His player comparison is Adrian Peterson. The real concern is his fumble rate, 1.8% in 2025, which ranks in the 11th percentile among all draft-eligible backs. But the big playability is genuinely ridiculous. 3 backs, 3 different profiles, and the Commanders are doing their homework across all 3. Look, fam, what's taking shape here is bigger than any single move. An elite receiver that nobody wants except us. A draft that can go glorious or turn into a nightmare depending on how that board falls. And a front office that is clearly working every single angle. Adam Peters doesn't improvise. And if there's one thing we've learned since he arrived in Ashburn, it's that when he moves right. The draft is 11 days out, and I'm not sleeping well until I hear that name called in Pittsburgh. You already know what to do. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would do if you're Peters on the clock at 7. And whether you think Aiyuk eventually lands in the DMV. See you in the next one. Raise hail.